The night had started quietly. The small Italian restaurant on the corner of 5th and Main was buzzing with the soft clinking of glasses, the aroma of garlic and basil drifting through the air. Families chatted over plates of pasta, couples shared wine, and laughter floated above the hum of conversation. At a corner booth, Ethan Cole sat with his daughter, Lily. He wasn't like the other men in the restaurant. He carried himself differently, his back straight, eyes sharp. Even though he wore a simple navy blue polo and jeans, there was something about him that made people glance twice. Maybe it was the calm authority in his movements, or the faint scar across his jawline that hinted at a past few dared to ask about. Lily, all of 10 years old, was chattering about her science project, her small hands moving wildly as she described building a model of the solar system. Ethan smiled, listening intently. To him, these moments were sacred. After years of deployment, dangerous missions, and a divorce that had nearly broken him, being here with his daughter was all that mattered. But danger had a way of finding him, even in the most ordinary places. At another table near the bar, a young woman sat alone, scrolling through her phone nervously. Her dark hair framed her pale face, and her body language screamed unease. Her name was Anna Martinez, and she had been watching the door more than her menu. When two men entered the restaurant, she froze. They weren't here for dinner. Both were tall, broad-shouldered, tattoos snaking up their arms. Their leather jackets gave them a certain menace, but it was their eyes, cold and hunting, that made Ethan notice them immediately. Years of training had sharpened his instincts. One glance and he knew trouble had just walked in. The men scanned the restaurant, their gaze locking on Anna. A smirk passed between them. They didn't sit down. Instead, they walked straight toward her. Ethan's muscles tightened. He glanced at Lily, who was still talking, oblivious to the tension building in the room. His protective instincts warred with his role as a father. But when one of the men grabbed Anna's wrist, hard enough to make her yelp, Ethan was already moving. Come on, Anna, the taller man sneered, his voice low but sharp. You thought you could just walk away? Let go of me, Kyle, she hissed, trying to pull her hand free. I don't want anything to do with you. The second man leaned closer, menace dripping from his grin. You owe us, sweetheart. You don't get to just sit here pretending like you're free. The restaurant fell into a hush. People turned to look, some whispering, others pretending not to notice. No one moved, no one intervened, except Ethan. He rose from his booth, his eyes narrowing. For a brief moment, the father in him hesitated. Lily was watching, but then he caught the fear in Anna's eyes. The decision was made. He stepped forward, his voice calm, controlled, but carrying a steel edge. Let her go. The two men turned, sizing him up. The taller one, Kyle, smirked. And who the hell are you? Ethan didn't answer. His gaze dropped to Kyle's hand, still gripping Anna's wrist. He took a single step closer. I won't say it again. Let her go. Anna's breath caught. Something about the stranger's voice, steady, commanding, made her believe him. Kyle laughed, releasing Anna just long enough to shove Ethan in the chest. Mind your business, hero. This doesn't concern you. The push barely moved him. Ethan stood firm, his eyes cold as steel. Around the restaurant, people held their breath. Lily clutched the edge of the booth, her white eyes locked on her father. Then Kyle made his mistake. He swung. What happened next took only 15 seconds. Ethan's training surged back like muscle memory. He sidestepped the punch effortlessly, his hand snapping up to trap Kyle's wrist. With a swift twist, Kyle let out a cry of pain as Ethan forced him down onto one knee. The second man lunged, pulling a knife from his jacket. Gasps rippled through the restaurant. Ethan moved before the blade could even flash, his other hand shot out, striking the man's forearm with pinpoint precision. The knife clattered to the floor. A single kick sent the attacker stumbling backward into a table, knocking over wine glasses. Patrons screamed and scrambled away. Ethan pressed Kyle's arm harder, pinning him to the ground, his voice low and lethal. You picked the wrong restaurant. The second man, dazed but furious, reached for the knife again, but Ethan was faster. He released Kyle, spun, and delivered a controlled strike to the man's chest that sent him sprawling against the bar, gasping for air. Silence followed, chairs overturned, glasses shattered, but it was quiet. Everyone stared. Anna's chest rose and fell rapidly, her eyes wide with disbelief. Lily looked stunned, though a flicker of pride lit her face. The attackers groaned on the floor, too broken to try again. And then, a man near the bar whispered loudly enough for the whole restaurant to hear. Holy hell, he moved like a Navy SEAL. Heads turned toward Ethan. Anna's eyes locked on him. Lily's hand trembled as she reached for her dad's. Daddy, she whispered. They don't know, do they? Ethan's jaw tightened. He hadn't wanted this life to follow him into the civilian world. He wanted to just be Lily's dad, no one else. But in that moment, the truth hung heavy in the air. Everyone now knew the quiet man in the corner wasn't just an ordinary father. He was Navy, and he wasn't done yet. The restaurant remained frozen in stunned silence. Broken glass sparkled on the floor, the smell of spilt wine heavy in the air. Ethan stood tall, steady, though his heart was pounding harder than he let anyone see. His daughter Lily clutched his sleeve, her wide eyes filled with a mixture of awe and fear. She had seen him stop fights before, schoolyard scuffles, drunks outside a gas station, but never like this. Never with the precision, the speed, the deadly calm that reminded him of the man he used to be. The man he had tried so hard to bury. Ethan bent slightly, resting a steadying hand on Lily's shoulder. It's okay, he murmured softly, his voice cutting through the hush. It's over. But it wasn't. Not yet. The two attackers were down, groaning, but their eyes still burned with something more than anger. It wasn't just a bar fight. They had purpose. Ethan could see it, the same look he'd seen on enemies overseas. Men who didn't act alone. Men who were part of something larger. He turned to the young woman they'd been after. Anna stood frozen, trembling, her face pale but her eyes bright with a mix of fear and relief. She looked at Ethan as if he were something unreal. Are you hurt? Ethan asked. She shook her head quickly. And no, thanks to you. Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard, her hands shaking as she clutched her bag. But, they're not going to stop. That caught Ethan's attention. Who are they? Anna hesitated, glancing nervously at the two men now struggling to stand. One wiped blood from his lip, the other reached for his jacket as if to find a phone. We need to leave, Ethan said firmly. He grabbed the knife from the floor, folded it, and slipped it across the bar counter out of reach. Lily, get your things. The restaurant staff hovered nervously near the kitchen, some patrons had already fled. The remaining diners stared at Ethan with wide, questioning eyes. None dared get in his way. Ethan guided Anna and Lily toward the side exit, keeping himself between them and the attackers. His movements were controlled, but every nerve in his body was alert. He knew men like that didn't act without orders. Someone would be waiting outside. The alley was cool and dim compared to the warm light of the restaurant. The sounds of the city night, horns, distant laughter, footsteps, rushed in. Ethan scanned quickly, his instincts running the same checklist he'd used 100 times in war zones: escape routes, threats, blind corners. All right, he said quietly, steadying Anna, who was on the verge of breaking down. Talk. Who were they? She bit her lip, her eyes darting. I didn't want to drag anyone into this. But, her voice trembled. Those men, they work for Marco Reyes. Ethan's jaw clenched. The name was familiar even here in the States. Reyes wasn't just a thug, he was a trafficker, a man whose network stretched across borders. Drugs, weapons, extortion, and worse. Anna looked at him, tears brimming. I used to work for him. Not like that, she rushed, shaking her head. I was just a bookkeeper. Numbers, money laundering, fake accounts. I thought it was just shady business. But then I found out where the money really came from. What they were doing. Ethan's stomach tightened. So you ran, he said flatly. I ran, she whispered. And I took something with me. Something he'll kill me for. Her hands trembled as she dug into her purse. From a hidden pocket, she pulled out a flash drive. Tiny, innocent looking. But Ethan knew better. This has all the proof. Accounts, shipments, everything, Anna said quickly. I was going to the police, but, her eyes darkened, there are people in the department who work for him. I don't know who I can trust. Ethan took the drive, weighing it in his hand. A familiar feeling settled in his chest, the heaviness of classified intel, the kind of thing men would die for. Or kill for. You picked the wrong night to have dinner in public, Ethan muttered, slipping the drive into his pocket. Anna flinched. You shouldn't have helped me. Now they'll come after you too. Ethan glanced down at Lily. She was silent, but her small hand clutched his. She trusted him completely, and in that moment, his decision was made. They won't touch her, he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. They didn't make it far. Halfway down the alley, headlights flared. A black SUV screeched to a stop, blocking the exit. Doors flew open and more men spilled out, hard eyes, heavy boots, weapons glinting under the streetlight. Anna gasped. Lily's grip tightened. Ethan pushed them both behind him, his stance shifting instantly. Calm, steady, lethal. The same way he had stood on battlefields oceans away. A man stepped forward from the SUV, taller, broader than the others. His voice was smooth, mocking. Mr. Cole. Ethan stiffened. He hadn't given his name. The man smirked. Yes, we know who you are. Navy man. Decorated. Discharged. But not forgotten. His grin widened. Reyes sends his regards. Anna's breath hitched. Ethan's mind raced. If they knew his name, then this wasn't just about Anna anymore. Someone had dug into his past. Someone wanted him involved. He lowered his voice, leaning toward Lily. Sweetheart, when I say run, you run to that fire escape and don't look back. Do you understand? Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Brave, just like her father. Anna shook her head fiercely. No, you can't fight them all. But Ethan was already moving. Dash dash dash. The first man charged with a baton. Ethan sidestepped, striking his elbow and flipping him flat on the pavement. Another swung a chain. Ethan caught it mid-swing, yanked hard, and drove his fist into the attacker's gut. Anna screamed as one of the men lunged toward her, but Lily, terrified yet quick, threw her backpack in his face. It gave Ethan just enough time to grab him and slam him into the alley wall. 3 down, 4 more circling. Ethan's breath was steady, but his mind was calculating. He couldn't hold them forever. And worse, the SUV's engine was still running. Backup could be seconds away. Then, sirens, red and blue lights flashed at the end of the alley. The men froze, cursing. We'll be back, one spat before piling back into the SUV. Tires screeched as they sped away. Ethan stayed alert, his fist still raised, until the SUV disappeared into the night. Only then did he let out a breath. Anna collapsed against the wall, shaking violently. Lily clung to her father, whispering, Daddy, are they gone? For now, he said grimly. Police officers rushed into the alley, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Ethan raised his hands slowly, not resisting. But his eyes were sharp. He saw the way some officers exchanged glances, the hesitation in their movements. Anna had been right, not all of them could be trusted. One officer, a younger man, his eyes steady and unafraid, stepped forward. Sir, we need you to come with us. Ethan met his gaze, weighing him. Depends who you're working for. The officer hesitated, then lowered his voice. Not Reyes. I've been trying to nail him for years. If you've got something, anything, we can use. Ethan glanced at Anna, then at Lily, who looked up at him with complete faith. Slowly, he pulled the flash drive from his pocket. This, he said, holding it up. This is how we end him. Dash dash dash. The night wasn't over. Ethan knew the war was just beginning. Protecting Anna meant protecting the evidence. Protecting Lily meant going back into the shadows he'd sworn he'd left behind. But as he wrapped his arm around his daughter, keeping her close, he knew one thing for certain. He hadn't fought all those years overseas just to let monsters like Reyes win at home. They wanted a fight, and they were about to learn what it meant to go to war with a Navy man.